Welcome to Switzerland, the land of chocolate, watches, skiing, and, importantly, neutrality. Switzerland has not been involved in an armed conflict for over 200 years, remaining neutral through both the First and Second World Wars. It may surprise you then to learn that in the 1950s, the Swiss would invest a significant amount of money in developing their own series of medium tanks, the Panzer 58, 61, and 68. For a country completely committed to remaining neutral, investing taxpayer money into developing a brand new tank may seem odd, but it's important to remember that even if Switzerland wanted to stay neutral, nothing's to say they wouldn't be invaded regardless. Luckily, the Swiss had a plan, known as the National Redoubt. When invaded, all Swiss troops would withdraw to a series of almost impregnable mountain fortifications deep in the Alps, where they would deny any invader passage across the mountains, making a last stand within their bunkers and tunnels. This strategy was one of deterrence. They wanted to make it clear that any invasion would be incredibly costly to the invader. In 1940, Germany managed to go around the Maginot Line in France, but you couldn't simply go around the Swiss National Redoubt. However, by 1950, the deterrence had somewhat wilted. The Swiss, like NATO, were concerned about the capabilities of the Soviets' new heavy tanks, and at this point in time, the only tanks the Swiss had were very lightly upgraded Jagdpanzer 38Ts. Sitting in a bunker is all well and good until the enemy bombs you into submission, lands a helicopter on the roof, or rolls up to you in an IS-3. A new, more aggressive defensive structure was needed, and the Swiss wanted this to be spearheaded by cutting-edge armoured vehicles. With 400 million francs burning a hole in their pockets, they browsed around for any foreign designs that would meet their high standards, and inquired about buying American M47 Pattons or British Centurions. Unfortunately for them, both of these countries were busy fighting in the Korean War and couldn't spare any manufacturing capability. In 1951, the decision was made to develop their own medium tank, a vehicle that would, if you pardon this obnoxious pun, be a Swiss Army knife of a tank. Good armour, good mobility, and a good gun. It would have to be narrow and nimble enough to navigate the mountainous Swiss countryside, and it would need to be simple enough for them to actually build. After all, the nation had zero tank manufacturing experience, apart from the slightly strange Nahkampfkanon 1 and 2 tank destroyer prototypes built around 5 years prior. As Swiss designers got to work on the new vehicle, the government purchased around 200 French AMX-13s as a stopgap measure, which would form the backbone of the nation's armoured force for the coming years. The first of these new designs was the KW-30, model 1950 and 1952. The 1950 design never left the drawing board, but the model 1952 did, with one prototype being produced, Switzerland's first ever tank. The KW-30, as per the name, was designed to a weight limit of around 30 tons. It mounted a domestically produced 90mm L60 gun in a hemispherical cast turret, with a Maybach engine and a similar transmission to that mounted in some late-war German designs. This gave the vehicle an impressive power-to-weight ratio of around 20 horsepower per ton, which is far better than the M48, T55 or Centurion. The armour was considerably less as a result, with only around 60mm of sloped frontal protection. But this was acceptable. Mobility mattered more in the Alps than armour. This first prototype was developed further into the KW-30 model 1957, a vehicle sometimes referred to as the Panzer 58 first prototype. The angled frontal hull armour on the KW-30-52 has been replaced with a thicker, fully cast, curved hull, not unlike that of the American M48 Patton. The new vehicle had 6 smaller road wheels instead of the 1952's 5 larger ones, and featured armoured side skirts along with a coaxial 20mm autocannon. You can see in this image the size difference between the KW-30 and the M47 Patton, with the vehicle's width being limited to just 3 meters. I want to just stop for a second here to address something. The Indien-Panzer. This was a post-war Porsche design to develop a vehicle for the Indian Army, and this vehicle looks an awful lot like the Panzer 58. It has a 90mm gun, cast curved turret, similar suspension, layout, mobility, etc. Many will say that the Panzer 58 is a direct descendant of the Indien-Panzer project, but that just can't be the case. The KW-30 was on the drawing board years before the Indien-Panzer, and they were just completely separate vehicles despite being outwardly so similar. Anyway, the KW-3057 was adopted as the Panzer 58. By this point, the Korean War had ended, and Switzerland had been able to purchase a large number of Centurion Mark IIIs. To make logistics easier, the next prototype of the Panzer 58 would have the Centurion's 20-pounder gun. It's this vehicle that survives in the Panzer Museum in Thun. The rest of the Panzer 58s, all 10 of them, would mount the 105mm L7 gun, as the Swiss upgraded their Centurions to Mark V standard. These 10 vehicles would serve with the Swiss army for a short while, mainly to see how well they performed before a large-scale production order was placed. This trial period allowed them to make some changes on the production vehicle, the Panzer 61. The turret shape was altered slightly, the tracks were widened, but the most significant change was to the power pack. The 600 horsepower Maybach of the Panzer 58 was replaced with a 630 horsepower turbocharged Mercedes-Benz power plant, and the entire system was simplified, with a more complex auxiliary power system being removed entirely. 150 Panzer 61s were ordered into full-scale production in, you guessed it, 1961, with the first vehicles entering service in 1965. The Panzer 61 kept the same suspension system as the Panzer 58, which is actually unique to this series of vehicles. From the outside, it may look like the tank uses a conventional torsion bar suspension system, but the Panzer 61 actually uses a Belleville washer rod suspension. Inside these cylinders on the side of the vehicle are columns of conical washers, stacked in such a way to act as heavy-duty springs. This system is cheap, simple, variable, and takes up no interior volume, which is one of the main downsides of torsion bars. However, as I said before, the Panzer 61 series are the only vehicles to ever use this system, so I'm assuming there must be some downside. I just have no idea what it is, so if you do know, please leave a comment below or chat to me in the Discord. The 150 Panzer 61s would serve in the Swiss army for over 30 years, alongside their AMX-13s, their Centurions, the 10 upgraded Panzer 58s, and the Panzer 68, an even more advanced model of the Panzer 61. I'm not sure if the Swiss are being irritating and vague on purpose just to spite me, but the choice to separate the Panzer 58, 61, and 68 into 3 separate vehicles with incredibly blurry lines between all 3 and their respective upgrades makes talking about these vehicles a little difficult, so I apologise if it's a bit confusing. The Panzer 68, like I said, was an attempt to modernise the Panzer 61, which some considered a little obsolete by the late 1960s, a time when tank development seemed to be moving at light speed. Development work started on the vehicle just after the introduction of the Panzer 61, and focused on upgrading the engine, adding a stabiliser to the main gun, improving the tracks, and getting rid of the 20mm coaxial gun and replacing it with a machine gun. The Panzer 68 would see 5 main upgrades through its own lengthy service life, none of which apparently warranted a new name. 170 Panzer 68s would be built by 1974, all of which would be upgraded to the AA2 upgrade, which saw the addition of an alternator, a thermal sleeve, and a carbon monoxide extraction system. Another 50 vehicles were built to this standard brand new. A 1975 upgrade program, known as the Panzer 68-75, featured a new turret, this one significantly bigger than the last and known as the Grosser term. 170 of these were built, bringing the total of vehicles to around 400. The Panzer 68, now operating into the late 1970s, was stuck using a chassis first designed in 1952 and a chassis that was incredibly compact. Fitting modern electronics and fire control systems into this aging design was proving difficult, and this is one of the main reasons the vehicle received that bigger turret. However, in 1979, the vehicle became the centre of a nationwide scandal. A Swiss paper, the Weltwoche, published a scathing report on the state of the Panzer 68 in army service. The report highlighted a number of glaring and dangerous issues with the vehicle and suggested that it was in no way fit for army service. These issues included a lack of sufficient NBC protection, an awful gearbox, a fault which meant that the radio could actually interfere with the turret controls and spin the turret without any input, and a very concerning electrical problem that meant that turning on the heater could sometimes fire the main gun. One newspaper sarcastically remarked that the Panzer 68 is more dangerous than it seems. The defence minister was forced to resign. The next upgrade was done in 1988 and was known as per tradition as the Panzer 68-88. This upgrade fixed most of the faults with the vehicle, overhauling the electronics and fitting the vehicle with a modern laser guidance system. This system was borrowed from the Panzer 87, which is the Swiss designation for their license-built Leopard 2s. The Swiss adoption of the Panzer 87 killed an existing upgrade program known as the Panzer 2000. This would have seen the Panzer 68 fleet completely overhauled and upgraded with a 120mm smoothbore main gun, brand new suspension and running gear, and additional bolted-on armoured plates to protect against hollow charges. In the end, it worked out a lot cheaper just to buy the Leopard, with Panzer 68's poor reputation making any export success almost impossible. The Panzer 68 served until the early 2000s, being sold for scrap by 2005. As always though, there were a series of strange offshoots of the vehicle. The Indien-Panzer 65 was a tank recovery vehicle, the Brückenpanzer 68 was an armoured bridge layer, the Fliegerabwehrpanzer 68 was an attempt to mount the turret of the Gepard on a widened Panzer 68 hull, and the Panzerkanone 68 was an experimental self-propelled artillery piece, which in the end lost out to the American M109 Paladin. The Zielfahrzeug 68 was a target vehicle for anti-tank missiles, with a fake steel turret in place of the real one and big armoured plates bolted to the sides. The last of these variants were taken out of service by 2011, marking the end of the Swiss Panzer project that started all the way back in 1950. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you to my patrons and to all my Discord members, and remember to subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you in the next one.